Everyone and welcome. Today, we're digging into a question that I think is on a lot of our minds. It's that huge, complicated puzzle of housing. You know, the dream of owning a home, and why, for so many people, it just feels like it's getting harder and harder to reach.
So yeah, why is it so incredibly tough to buy a house in some places? We hear all the usual suspects, right? Not enough land, too many investors, foreign buyers. But for today, let's set those aside. We're going to follow the data, like detectives on a case, to see if a different, maybe even surprising story starts to take shape. Let the investigation begin.
So first, let's just get a sense of the scale of this problem. What you're looking at here is the house price-to-income ratio. Basically, how many years of your entire salary it would take to buy an average home. You see places like France or Japan down there around a manageable 6 or 7 years. But then, your eyes drift to the top, Taipei. We're talking about a staggering 16 years. That is more than double what you see in other major economies. It really puts Taiwan in a completely different league when it comes to housing being out of reach.
Okay, so where do we even begin to unravel this? Our first clue is something many people in Taiwan are known for, a really strong habit of saving money. So the question is, could it be that simple? Are people saving so much money that all that cash is just flooding the property market and sending prices to the moon? Let's see what the numbers say.
And wow, the data here is pretty black and white. This chart shows you the percentage of their take-home pay that families are putting away. In Taiwan, it's almost 24%. Now compare that to the US, which is way down at less than 5%. So this confirms it, right? The savings habit is not just a stereotype. It is a massive economic force. We're talking about a huge portion of income being socked away.
In fact, it's so extreme that a recent Alliance Global Wealth report called Taiwan's excess savings rate unparalleled in the world. Think about that word, unparalleled. Not just high, but literally in a class of its own. So it seems like a solid theory, right? A ton of savings equals a ton of money chasing property. But is that really the whole story?
Let's move on to our second clue. This one is a little less obvious. I'm calling it the hidden safety net. What we're talking about here is public social welfare. You know, things like government-funded healthcare, pensions for retirement, unemployment benefits. Could the strength or weakness of this safety net actually change how people think about their money?
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at the contrast on this slide. You've got France, which puts about 32% of its entire economic output into social welfare. The average for other developed countries is around 21%. And then you have Taiwan at about 11%. That is nearly half the average. This shows a huge, fundamental difference in how much the government steps in to provide a financial backstop for its people.
Okay, so we have our two main clues on the table: a super high savings rate and a relatively low level of social welfare spending. By themselves, they're just interesting facts. But what happens when we connect the dots, when we run the analysis and let the data talk? A pattern emerges that is frankly pretty stunning.
We're going to look at something called a correlation coefficient. Don't worry, it's simple. It's just a number from -1 to +1 that tells us how strongly two things are linked. +1 means they move together perfectly, -1 means they're perfect opposites, and 0 means no connection at all.
First up, savings rate versus house prices. We get a correlation of positive 0.41. So this tells us, yeah, there's a connection. Countries where people save more tend to have higher house prices. Our first clue wasn't wrong. But, you know, a score of 0.41, that's a pretty weak link. It's part of the picture, but it's definitely not the main event.
Next, what about savings rate versus social welfare? Here we get a -0.35. And this makes sense, right? If the government has a strong safety net, you probably don't feel the pressure to save as much yourself. But again, it's a pretty weak connection, not a very strong signal.
And then there's this. This is the big one. This is the moment it all clicks. The correlation between house prices and social welfare is -0.85. Now, in the world of data, that is an incredibly strong relationship. This is the smoking gun. What it tells us, loud and clear, is that there is a powerful, consistent trend. The more a country spends on social welfare, the more affordable its housing tends to be.
So we have this really strong statistical connection. But what's the actual logic here? I mean, how could government spending on healthcare possibly change the price of an apartment? Let's walk through it, step by step.
It really seems to follow this path. It starts with a solid social welfare system. When you have that, the intense pressure on families to save up a huge nest egg just in case, for retirement, for a medical emergency, it eases off. With less pressure to build that personal fortress of cash, there's also less of a rush to find a super safe place to park all that money. And what do people see as the ultimate safe haven asset? Real estate. So when property isn't seen as the only financial lifeboat, that frantic demand cools down and prices have a chance to stabilize.
Now, of course, a quick and important reality check. This analysis is based on a sample of 7 economies. And as anyone in data will tell you, correlation is not causation. Just because these two things move in opposite directions doesn't prove one causes the other. But a correlation as strong as -0.85, that's not just a coincidence. It's pointing to a deep structural relationship between how a country takes care of its people and how its housing market actually works.
So, what's the final takeaway from this whole data story? Well, it suggests that maybe, just maybe, the conversation we're all having about housing is a bit too narrow. We talk nonstop about supply and demand, about interest rates and zoning laws, but this data suggests the real limit on housing prices might not be economic at all. It might be social.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. What if the most powerful housing policy has nothing to do with construction permits? What if the path to more affordable homes isn't just about building more houses, but about building a society where a house can just be a home again, instead of being the only reliable path to a secure future? It's a big question and definitely one worth thinking about. Thanks for watching.